Everyday Samurai, Episode 61. Greetings, friends, and welcome to Everyday Samurai, in service to your liberty and the security of a free state. How do you do? Thank you for joining us once again for an exploration of the principles in mindset, martial art, and the science of political economy directly oriented on advancing a free society of empowered individuals. You might have heard some derivation of the phrase that every dark cloud has a silver lining, and this is directly studied in the samurai-related martial arts, particularly under edged weapons engagement. You see, every angle of attack has a counter angle through which you can achieve victory. Now, you might have also heard the phrase that the way of the warrior is found in death, and ultimately, when there is no opportunity to succeed, then the best victory is to die with dignity by maintaining your mental composure. And that's true. At some point, we all must surrender to fate. However, when you let go of looking at the dark cloud and start to look for the silver lining, chances are you can find one. And one of the lessons also for the samurai comes directly from Miyamoto Musashi's Gorin no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings, where he says it really doesn't matter whether you take the right stance or the left stance, the high guard or the low guard. What matters in combat is that you cut the enemy down. And that's a reminder of how we should train, how we should orient our lives, how we should look at problems, quote unquote. We should see problems, be aware of them, have a situational awareness that engages with circumstances as they are, and not necessarily be fooled by the appearances of someone being bigger, stronger, faster, better armed, what have you. There's always a solution. It might not be direct engagement. If there is an opportunity to avoid danger, that is best. Sun Tzu said that one must keep it whole when contending for all under heaven. That means the real victory is not to engage in a clash or destroy things, but to maintain that which we have and advance a more peaceful and prosperous society, looking for opportunities for harmony. So I won't belabor the point because time is short. I want to get to continuing our read of Dr. Edwin Vieira's By Tyranny Out of Necessity, the Bastardy of Martial Law, which again is focused on the problem, but also provides a direct solution and a very elegant, simple, yet effective solution to the creeping tyranny that is growing up all around us. And we don't need to look far in today's headlines to notice the problems that are out there and all of the downstream effects that are being caused by the perverse incentives built into the political economic structure of society today. The point I'm trying to make is that there is always a solution to everything, and for us as students of martial art and political economy, we look for the most efficient, the most labor-saving, the most prodigious ways of gaining efficacy in the world. And this is a principle that transcends personal issues as well as social and political and geopolitical issues worldwide. The greatest challenge to peace in the world is the perverse incentives allowing for politicians and bureaucrats to enjoy a monopoly on the use of force that is coupled with the power to tax. Eliminating that monopoly would be the greatest benefit to humanity worldwide. And that is a global perspective as well as a local perspective. The question is, how do we get there? How can free people secure a free state from the ambitions of politicians, bureaucrats, and the oligarchs pulling the strings behind the scene? The answer is very simple. And again, we look for solutions. We, in our personal lives, develop well-formed goals, SMART goals, if you are familiar with that acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-sensitive. We can also apply that to the larger scale. What's a specific SMART goal in the realm of political economy? Well, we attack along two lines of effort. First being money on the economic front, and then using militia on the political front, because the politics is always about the use of force and the administration of law, which is what politics is supposed to do. But as Friedrich Bastiat wrote, politics gets perverted into an instrument of plunder. And that's exactly what we have now. The solution is very simple. Problem is, people are enamored with admiring the problem. Problems compounding problems. I use the word problem twice there deliberately because it creates a compounding effect. Everybody's looking at the problem, and that is the problem. The way out of the problem is to look for solutions, and that's precisely what focusing on money, militia, and of course those things are best supplied on a free market. That's what a free state looks like. everyone is secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effect, or in other words, their lives, liberties, and property. And inherent to the principle of private property is that everyone gets to choose through voluntary contract who they hire to supplement their own security for their own private property. You see, you can't have private property if some politician or bureaucrat ostensibly operating as government tells you how you can enjoy it or use it. Again, the principle of private property includes the right to be free from incursion by others. So the equal justice under the law principle prevents negative externalities or somebody enjoying their property that impinges upon anyone else's enjoyment of their own property, opens up the door for remedial torts. So we don't need bureaucracies like the EPA to handle environmental issues. Those problems can best be resolved by common law courts, lawsuits, and torts. If somebody impinges upon someone else's enjoyment of their private property, that opens them up to a civil suit. And a civil suit is best oriented towards restoration. So again, we have that Taoist principle of not creating problems in the first place, and then also finding the most elegant solutions for resolving and remediating problems. So there's no need for politicians to be involved in this process. That is part of the illusion. Dropping the illusion, start looking for the most efficient means of resolving conflict, are to realize that this whole facade of politicians being involved in every aspect of our lives, including education and regulating various industries, all of those things are canards that only serve to further exacerbate problems. So it's okay for us to look at problems, but again, look for those smart solutions, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive in our own lives and as well as in the outer world. So we'll just keep that in mind as we resume our passage through chapter 3 of Dr. Edwin Vieira's book, where, when we last left off, again, we're in a very problem-oriented chapter where he's describing the ultimate reasons why the political caste wants to impose martial law. And when we understand their motives, then we can also find ways to address the underlying issue. I've already given away the plot, in the sense that the way to resolve this and to constrain politicians to their delegated, limited functions is through, number one, the power of the purse, which we have to go back to a constitutionally sound money, gold and silver, but in reality, gold and silver are physical properties that can be seized at any border and a number of different checkpoints that the political caste has unlawfully set up. So leveraging technology, we advance, we put fresh garments on those venerable principles, as the founder of Aikido would say. Modern technology allows us for cryptographically impervious digital assets, namely Bitcoin. It's the only cryptocurrency, quote unquote, that I would ever recommend to anyone I care about, at least at this point. But money that is beyond manipulation and beyond seizure by political entities, controlling the power of the purse, only paying politicians and bureaucrats what they are delegated to handle, is one of the key lines of effort necessary in the realm of political economy. The second half, of course, is the militia as the solution for securing a free state, and then everything else is handled by the market. But of course, that leaves no room for politicians, bureaucrats, oligarchs, technocrats to enjoy self-aggrandizement. So of course they're going to agitate against it. And the very notion of monopoly sets up a path to conflict with others that would claim monopoly. So states internationally cannot work in harmony with one another because they're all trying to advance their sphere of influence and jurisdiction. Monopoly politics cannot play well on a global stage, which is why there's so much conflict in the world. You want to minimize conflict, you have to restrain the ambitions of the political case. This is why we study the problem and then always look immediately to the solution, not being wrapped up in the problem, not being enamored by the problem, not indulging in fear porn and rage porn. So let's continue with Dr. Edwin Vieira, where last he was talking about the haves, the have-nots, and the used-to-haves, which is, again, setting society against itself with greater resentment and social discontent, which always plays to the hands of those that would seek to divide and rule. Overcoming that means looking for the silver lining in the dark cloud. So here we go. That was extraordinarily short-sighted indeed. For common Americans, especially among the used-to-haves, now realize that the haves have played them for suckers all along. They recognize that the present economic mess is not an enigmatic, intractable problem without an identifiable cause or an indicated solution. Neither is it the result simply of ignorance, negligence, or even run-of-the-mill greed on the part of the haves and their puppets in public office. and mouthpieces in the big media. Instead, it is the cynically systematic looting of the general public in order to make up for the massive losses the haves would otherwise suffer as the result of their reckless speculations in derivatives and other uncovered economic wagers, by forcing common Americans to carry the economic cross of austerity, the euphemism for politically mediated expropriation, and worse yet, to use the resulting degradation of the used-to-haves along with the despair of the have-nots to augment the economic and political power of the haves, so as to render their domination of society unchallengeable in the future. The goal being to reduce the used-to-haves as well as the have-nots to mere sacrificial pawns on the haves' chessboard of corporativism. Americans now correctly recognize this as nothing but a zero-sum game, in which their own payoff is precisely zero, namely, what the haves gain, the have-nots and the used-to-haves lose permanently. And they can predict that absent fundamental change, their impoverishment will only intensify as time goes by. Intensify it surely will. That the haves' corporatist schemes have national and international aspects has magnified the downward pressure on America's economic viability and social stability. Massive redistribution of wealth, engineered through the Federal Reserve System and its clients, and the continuous injections of economic irrationality into the free market that looting has brought about would eventually have proven fatal to this country's domestic economy with no need of any outside assistance. But the haves have accelerated the destructive process by expanding their political racketeering business model from the domestic to the global level, exerting their economic and political power through regional trade agreements such as the old WTO, GATA, and NAFTA, and soon the new TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and TTIP, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, as well as by means of aggressive neo-colonialist military adventures around the world for which Americans are made to pay in blood and treasure. The haves have transformed national corporations into international corporations and even supranational corporations with immense economic power and the political influence that power buys. From America, they have exported entire industries overseas, inflicting huge losses of jobs, personal income, and governmental tax receipts here at home, while into America they have promoted an influx of illegal aliens, driving down wage rates and exacerbating unemployment for the native population, and straining social services to their breaking points. The haves' rule of thumb has always been that average Americans were worth no more than what could be extracted from them. But now they have driven America's economy to its nadir, at which less and less can be extracted each day. The result being that major municipalities across the country, and even some states, none of which can exercise the special privilege to create currency out of nothing in the manner of the Federal Reserve System, are facing bankruptcy. More than a few of the domestic industries that the haves have destroyed, if not actually indispensably vital to America's national defense, are undoubtedly of signal importance, so much so that this country's security is increasingly compromised or held hostage to foreign manufacturers and traders. Were that not enough, the haves have allowed America's infrastructure to decay to the point at which many municipalities have become well nigh unlivable, at least by first world standards, which also presents dire socio-political implications for homeland security. In addition, the haves have riven America's political, economic, and social fabrics with the confusions, divisions, and antagonisms of multiculturalism. The problem is that no nation has ever been created through or held together by diversity. The very concept of a nation presumes the existence of unity on the fundamental points which define it. In America in particular, multiculturalism might be tolerable in some social relations if citizenship were conditioned upon uniculturalism in the political and economic realms, by requiring each legal immigrant to demonstrate his or her understanding of and loyalty to the basic tenets of Americanism, namely national independence, the Declaration of Independence, limited government, the Constitution, free markets beneficial to all, the general welfare, personal freedom, the Bill of Rights, the centripetal force of a single national language, English, in which those fundamental laws, as well as America's statutes and judicial decisions, are written, and perhaps most important of all, each individual's duty to the community to be ever ready to retain and protect good government, and to throw off bad government if necessary through being called forth and serving in the militia. But no, The haves have promoted the subversion, even the open denigration of Americanism at every turn, particularly with respect to the right of the people to keep and bear arms, the unfettered exercise of which is essential to the maintenance of well-regulated militia. The one and only culture that vaunted inclusiveness of multiculturalism scrupulously excludes is Americanism. And again, Dr. Vieira is describing something that is necessary to the security of a free state. The militia is not just your right to keep and bear arms, but it is the means by which we, the people, execute the laws, repel invasions, and suppress insurrections, particularly those insurrections against constitutional order that is being carried out by public officers on behalf of their oligarchical string pullers. This is why you see so much agitation against gun culture, against an armed population. This is all part of a divide and rule strategy, lulling people back to sleep with ball-chasing sports, bred in circuses of the modern age. Continuing. None of this has been accidental. It has all been designed to force Americans into a new world order in which supranational corporations, in particular banks and allied financial institutions, call all the shots economically, politically, socially, and culturally. If Americans' public institutions have been allowed to remain deceptively representative in form, whom they represent has been radically altered in substance. Not the American people, but the supranational corporations are in charge. Governmental institutions throughout the federal system have effectively been transformed, politically, and in many cases economically, into wholly owned subsidiaries of these corporations. Nonetheless, the haves' plans for globalism are not without a fatal flaw. Although they have proven adept at foisting their schemes onto gaumeless Americans, they cannot impose them on major foreign countries, such as China, surely not, and Russia, very likely not, except perhaps through the desperate expedient of war. Neither can they guarantee that countries which appear to be firmly within the globalist camp today, such as Germany, will remain there tomorrow. Indeed, had they any foresight, the haves would be terrified of the distinct possibility that China, Russia, and Germany will form a new Dreiecksbund, many orders of magnitude more puissant than Bismarck's original model, that aimed at uniting in interests that the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Russian empires of his day, which will come to dominate the Eurasian landmass, and are, from there, will exert overwhelming influence everywhere else. Under these circumstances, the haves now find themselves about to be hoisted with their own petard here at home, confronted by a serious political threat to their positions which they themselves created, and for which no simple solution satisfactory to them is available within the current complex of valid laws of the United States. Its detractors have long and rightly condemned the Federal Reserve System and its allied financial institutions as thoroughly at odds with polity ruled by the consent of the governed. In the past, they proved this to be not much of a stumbling block for the banking cartel, though, because most Americans, being pathetically naive, woefully uneducated about the realities of sound economics, law, and especially criminal politics, and largely bereft of mutual sympathy for and solidarity with their countrymen, have repeatedly fallen prey to the age-old tactics of divide and rule, and bait and switch, which the haves have successfully employed through their two major political parties in election after election. Although we the people have always held, as they still hold, in their own hands the ultimate sovereignty in this country, their appreciation of their own legal authority has been so limited and their physical might so diffused, disorganized, and disused that heretofore they could neither understand the power to which they were entitled nor effectively wield it. In particular, they have been unable to avail themselves of any permanent institutions within the federal system that were theirs alone to command. Neither the governmental apparatus at any level, nor the electoral process, which the two major parties have long dominated, nor the big media, nor the educational establishment, nor the economic superstructure of society, especially with respect to money, banking, and high finance, because no proper militia of the several states have existed as viable forces in being since the early years of the 20th century. Here again, Dr. Vieira references the 1903 Dick Act, transformed the militia of the several states into the National Guard, and it should come immediately following that there is nothing national about the militia of the several states. This is a federation of free and independent republics cooperating for mutual security, called this United States. It is a compound republic, not a nation. So the states need to maintain their own militia, not have them absorbed into a national military apparatus. That's one of the main reasons why the Federation of Republics called the United States is dysfunctional right now. And therefore, this Dick Act is prima facie unconstitutional and should be automatically dismissed as such. Nevertheless, as this country's economy has stumbled towards collapse under what the haves call their leadership, but which common Americans experience as lies, larceny, looting, and general lawlessness on the part of the ruling class, the haves are finding it increasingly difficult to engineer through their old charades the consent of the governed to social arrangements which most of the governed finally realize are not just adverse, but even aggressively antagonistic to their interests. Hey friends, imagine if you didn't have to battle with a busy mind and a restless body. Imagine if it took just a few minutes a day to set your mindset straight. And imagine if it brought instant results. Less stress, more happiness, greater focus, improved creativity immediately. Well, you can stop imagining. You see, today, I'd like you to know about an awesome audio meditation program called Zen 12. Zen 12 gives you a full hour's worth of deep meditation, all in just 12 minutes. It uses brainwave sounds to speed up the process, and it's genuinely unlike anything you've experienced before. I use this meditation program myself and recommend you do just as much. Just listen and experience the wonderful results. It's meditation for the modern world, for busy people, and it is the most efficient way to get the results that you need. Right now, you can get a free sample of this wonderful technology at everydaysamurai.life/Zen12. Your commitment to a mindfulness practice is essential to bringing your highest faculties online so you can perform your best at all you do, and Zen 12 can help you maximize the results. Check out everydaysamurai.life/Zen12. That's everydaysamurai.life/Zen12. Yeah! Even the dullest Americans are coming to recognize that the haves and their political puppets took control of this country's economy long ago. Since then, they have systematically and cynically plundered it, amassing unearned and abusive, indeed obscene profits for themselves at everyone else's expense. And now that the economy is in a state of freefall, as a result of their own maladministration, the haves intend to assign to innocent Americans the responsibility for the collapse by imposing upon them its full consequences through radically decreased standards of living, while the haves continue to feather their own nests through massive bailouts and other special privileges arranged by their stooges in the general government. Ordinary Americans are beginning to see the light of a solution to this galling problem at the end of the tunnel, namely that those who garnished the profits, even as they gutted the economy, should be held personally responsible for the losses their misbehavior has inflicted upon everyone else by being stripped of their positions of power, their prestige, their property they have accumulated through what wrongdoing, and in many cases their freedom too. The American people's newfound knowledge of their predicament, its source, and the most effective means for its resolution may not yet itself be power, but it can easily become an effective demand for power. What for decades has amounted to a repetitive, reflexive extension of the consent of the governed to the same old institutions and patterns of political deception and economic exploitation is now being transformed into the more or less passive withholding of consent from the governmental apparatus, and form the pyramidal political and economic arrangements of which that apparatus forms the apex. This manifests itself in silent resentment of, reluctance to cooperate with, and even various forms of subtle resistance against the haves. Most ominously for the haves, common Americans, aware that public officials will do nothing to correct the intolerable situation the banking cartel has caused, are beginning to inquire into what political and legal authority they themselves can and must wield in their own defense, and against whom they must direct it. At some point, Americans' merely passive withholding of consent will become their active withdrawal of consent in various forms of open opposition to the oppression, which, and to the oppressors who, beset them. Then the fabric of political, economic, and social controls the banking cartel and its clients have woven on its behalf will unravel in the manner of a cheap sweater. The haves understand that the emerging socio-political danger of actual resistance on the part of a significant segment of the general public cannot be diffused by invoking the types of emergency powers applicable to the recurrent economic problems caused by central banking in the past. These powers can hold down the lid on a social pot bubbling with merely economic dissatisfaction, but they are useless when the heat becomes so intense that the contents of the pot come to a full boil politically, and the resulting pressure blows the lid off. As surely as day follows night, economic collapse will engender social dislocations, and social dislocations will incite civil unrest. Civil unrest will escalate into civil disobedience. Civil disobedience will inevitably become organized as political opposition and resistance, which, when it matures into the complete withdrawal of the consent of the governed, will deprive the haves of their political power, then their economic power, then their accumulated wealth, and finally, their liberty. And I will stop the read of chapter 3 there, knowing that there is much more to come from this great and insightful book that shines so much light on what is happening today in 2024, even as it was written back in 2015. Things are becoming much more acute, problems are much more exacerbated, and we are seeing great resistance to the whole notion of governance. And quite frankly, it is well deserved. Politicians and bureaucrats deserve to be mocked, ridiculed, and resisted at every turn because their designs are in fact harmful to the good of the people. They are not providing for the general welfare by injecting themselves into every aspect of economic life. And they are creating ever more schemes for divide and rule, which is why you see such cultural degradation on display. I started this recording by talking about the silver lining in every dark cloud, and there is indeed an opportunity for massive reform, and it is incumbent upon us to prepare ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and in the body of all of our affairs to be prepared, whatever that looks like for you. Again, stop looking at the problem, start looking at solutions, start looking at the angle of victory rather than the angle of attack that are coming down upon you. That's the main message. I am not in a militia. I am not starting a militia. I am not advocating that you do anything related to calling yourself a militia. But I do wholeheartedly want people to understand that the supreme law of the land allows for we the people to execute the laws, repel invasions, and suppress insurrection. That is the purpose of the militia of the several states. That is why the militia are necessary to the security of a free state, and they are currently absent from today's political configuration. This is one of the main reasons why there is so much corruption and crime going on. And there is a solution. The supreme law of the land is still there. It is simply a matter of reawakening the fact that we, the people, are the sovereign, not the politicians and the bureaucrats. It's time to stop thinking like a serf and start acting like a sovereign. Do you accept the fact that you are sovereign over your own life? Do you accept the fact that sovereignty requires asserting your dominion? So that might mean that you need to look squarely in the face of whatever problems you are facing in your own life. Instead of avoiding things, face them head on. Look at the dark cloud, but also look beyond it to see the silver lining. This is why we train. This is the way. The way is in training. Friends, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Everyday Samurai and look forward to seeing you next time. If you like what you've heard here, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Make sure that you never miss an episode. Be a part of that community that is building enlightened warriorship, advancing freedom through mindset, martial art, and political economy. Until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and be well.